Okay, our proclamation today is whereas Lori Rathke has served the residents of Ozaukee County for more than 2.5 decades and has always placed the emotional safety of the residents first and foremost while simultaneously crafting meaningful relationships with our partners in law enforcement throughout Ozaukee County. Lori used her knowledge and her experience involving mental health crisis to provide invaluable assistance to law enforcement officers and citizens in crisis, simultaneously changing lives and cultivating the very fabric of public safety countywide. Lori has integral in developing Ozaukee County's crisis intervention team, the CIT training. Since 2015, Lori was a CIT presenter on Chapter 51, coordinated site visits with consumers, guided discussions on mental health crisis situations, and mentored officers during the CIT scenario. Lori became a member of Ozaukee County's crisis incident debrief team, leading over 20 debriefs, helping over 185 local officers, EMTs, firefighters, and dispatchers in the aftermath of critical incidents. She has been a main point of contact for many first responders who struggled through coping with critical incidents. Lori retired on January 28th, 22 as a crisis management supervisor after nearly 27 years of service with commitment and compassion to Ozaukee County. Now therefore be it proclaimed that I, Lee Schlenville, chairperson of Ozaukee County Board of Supervisors, do hereby proclaim that Lori Rathke has enriched the lives of all Ozaukee County citizens by implementing the crisis intervention system that residents and professionals rely on today. I express my sincere and grateful appreciation for her years of dedicated service and wish her well-deserved happy and healthy retirement with her family and friends. As you can see by the support in the back of the room, you have a lot of friends back there and you've done a tremendous job and we appreciate everything you did. Congratulations.
I've prepared a 45-minute PowerPoint presentation for you. Do we have time? No. I'm just kidding. I wrote down some thoughts because I didn't want to forget anything. I'm so very appreciative of this recognition as it provides me the opportunity to express my gratitude. This recognition doesn't belong only to me, it belongs to the enormous collection of Ozaukee County employees, both past and present. It's been 27 years. There's been a lot of very good people that have come through these doors and left. Most especially my community partners, most especially law enforcement, the hospitals, first responders, but certainly in primary, the reason we're all here is the community. I had a passion for working with the community and want to continue doing that. I think had the climate been different, I think I'd still be here. But truly, I loved every single minute of working here. I want to continue working for my community and feel that's the most important part of this whole thing. So this presentation is not just for me, it's for the community, for the community partners we have, and for everybody that's worked so hard to work together as partners. Thank you.
As you can see by the support in the back of the room, we've never had that much support for a proclamation before, so congratulations, Lori. Okay, next time we'll go on to, oops. Next up, we'll go on to public comment. We have comment cards in the back if anybody would want to comment on anything. Otherwise, our first speaker is Don Dorwart.
Thank you. Some of you are familiar with me. Some of you may be even tired of listening to me, so I'll make this short. I'm here about the term limits. I served on the board for 20 years, from 2020 to 2000 to 2020. And during those 20 years, I served under 5 chairs. Mr. Bly, Ms. Smith, Sandy Worth, and Rob Brooks, and Lee Schlenvold. And that averages out to about 4 years per county chair. The person that I would like to be proud of most of all is serving under Rob Brooks. I served under him for 9 years, and many of you in this room also. He was elected chair in his second term on the board. The cream normally rises to the top, and if you know what you're doing, you are going to recognize when that happens, and you're going to put those people in places of leadership. Now, serving under Rob for 9 years, I wouldn't have traded 10 minutes of that time for any other person in the room, and I would suggest that a number of us agree with that. He was innovative, he was intelligent, he came up with ideas that we wondered, where did he come up with that idea? But they worked and things like that. When you have an individual like that in leadership, you don't want to boot him out after 2 years because the policy says so. And just to put in parentheses, if that situation comes about, you can suspend the rules and vote him back in anyhow. So letting that aside, I would urge all of you on the board to consider that you are here for a reason, to stand up and use the gumption that you're supposed to have brought with you to stand up and do the right thing when it's the time comes. In my second or third term, we were faced with reducing board size. That was a whole big deal at the time. Reduce boards down to 8 people or whatever. There's all kinds of crazy things happening. We came up with a plan to restructure the county board. It was happening at the same time. We formed 5 committees out of dozens of committees. And so we had 5 chairs and 5 people on a committee, and one chair, the chair of the board, was the chair of the executive committee, made up of the chairs of the other committees. It was a perfect setup, and it worked well, and it's still working well. I sat up in the front in district number 2, and I was sitting right next to Rose Leiter. Some of you are familiar with her. She was a longtime incumbent and very influential from time to time. And I was going to end up in the district, the same district she was, and being a new supervisor somewhat, I knew that, well, if I'm going to lose this race, but I made the motion to proceed with the reducing of the board size, knowing full well that I was going to lose the next election because I was running against Rose. And the result of that was that I actually won by 6 votes. And it surprised the heck out of me, but there was a recount because it was so close. And the result of that was I won by 6 votes. Our officials in Ozaukee County do things right the first time. I'd like to make everybody aware of that. But that proves to you that you, no matter where the chips fall, your job is to stand up and do what's right at the time. And if to vote someone out of the chair and replace them with somebody else, sometimes there's hard feelings, you're embarrassed, you don't want to do this and whatever. That's not your job. Your job is to do the right thing at the time and let the chips fall where they may. So putting in place this term limits is not an improvement in government. It's just an excuse not to have to do your job when the time is right. So I would sincerely urge you to vote Resolution 2167 down when it comes before you. It will give you more opportunity in the future, especially with a board that's going to have a turnover like the board is going to in this next election. It's critical that things remain the same and you don't saddle a new board with very little experience with new policy. So it's enough jabbering for me. I just recommend that you vote that resolution down. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Don. Is there any other public comment? Legislative update? Rick, did you have anything? Do you have anything for legislative update at all? Oh, okay. Communications, Julie?
I have none.
Claims, Rhonda?
None today.
As you can see, we have some special guests here today. Shannon Whitworth, our supervisor, brought in some of his students from Milwaukee Lutheran, and we're pleased to have them here. They can see government in action. It's a great opportunity, and thank you, Shannon. Do you want to add anything at all to the?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, just so everybody that I'm kind of new here, so just so everyone knows, my day job is I am the director of the Free Enterprise Academy at Milwaukee Lutheran High School. And since I've had the opportunity, the pleasure and the privilege to be appointed as a supervisor here in Ozaukee County, I figured it would be an opportunity to bring some of our students up here to get a good look at what local government does and how it works. Today we have members of our Free Enterprise Academy, our Honors Academy, as well as some of our civics classes. So we've got the range from, I believe, sophomores to seniors here today. And so these are some of our best and brightest students at Milwaukee Lutheran. I don't know how much of you know about Milwaukee Lutheran, but it is 860 students. Most are inner city considered economically disadvantaged kids that take advantage of the Milwaukee County Parental Choice Program. So a lot of these kids might have been going to the Milwaukee Public Schools, but their parents have opted them out, presumably to give them a better opportunity and better performance academically and competitively. So here they are, and we're happy to have them here, and I thank them for being here, and I thank you for being so welcoming to them.
Right. And at any time any of you students want to chime in a debate, you're welcome to it. So. All right, next up, we'll start off with the county administrator's report. Jason?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
I had my best law enforcement joke lined up, and now I feel like it's gonna bomb here. Yeah, well, good day to speed though in Ozaukee County. I feel like maybe. All right. On that note, I think we'll be having a little bit of our own March Madness here as we bring the 2020-2022 board term to a close as we work to wrap up county business and plan for the next 2 years. So plenty of exciting stuff planned for the month of March. And I think a lot of good work ahead of us in the next term. So looking forward to both of those things. As you know, I think as we mentioned, we'll have our official Youth and Government Day, finally returning after a 2-year hiatus at our next meeting, March 16th. But thanks to Supervisor Whitworth, we've got a bit of a spring training game or something. You know, we got a little warm up here today. So we always welcome any students, you know, who are interested in government and provide an opportunity to watch this legislative body in action. In 2 weeks, we'll have our Sheriff's Department and Human Services Department back to do their human trafficking presentation. Some of you members may remember that one. It was well received by the schools, and they actually requested that we re-up that one for the students in attendance. We'll also have a discussion of our EMS issues. That will be on the agenda. So we'll have representatives of the fire community as well as some municipalities in-house to present on the issue and answer questions. We'll have an update on county board rules and a presentation on the project fund. So I'm sure those two will knock the socks off the children in the audience that day. So jam-packed day. You might want to pack a lunch or bring a piece of hard candy to keep your blood sugar up. The work on our classification and compensation study is underway. We've had meetings with all our department heads. We've had all employee meetings. We recorded that meeting so our employees can go back and watch that video if they want. The employee meeting was well attended, so I think many people are engaged. They have the JDQ, which is the job description questionnaire. Basically, we'll ask every employee or every group of employees to fill out this questionnaire and kind of describe their jobs, and then that'll be part of the review. Today, you will see on the agenda, we're going to approve the comparables, the comparable counties that we will use to perform the compensation and classification study. We casted a wide net. We will have our consultant available if needed today, but we casted a wide net for a couple of reasons. Number one, and as we talked with our consultant, it's easier to pull out the data than it is to push it in once you're moving along through the process. And it's just easier to eliminate a comparable than it is to add one. As far as 2021 fiscal closing, we're doing well. And outside of some of the challenges at Lasada, which we've detailed, primarily due to the COVID-19 pandemic, all of our county departments will end the year in good fiscal shape. Our sales tax, once again, really buoyed our operations. And at this time, we're looking at $1 million or more in surplus for sales tax. I think that unfortunately may be driven by some of the inflationary pressures that our citizens are experiencing at the grocery store and other areas of everyday life. But I am able to say, while these revenues are a tax on citizens and not paid only by Ozaukee County tax citizens, they've really allowed the county to reduce property taxes in 2 consecutive budgets. So they really help to support the operation. And our sales tax continues to outperform our conservative budget estimates that we set forth in every year. So I think that should provide us at least some level of comfort as we move into some areas of uncertainty economically, I think here, and obviously with things that are going on abroad. If you did not see the email that I sent yesterday, the executive committee took 2 actions as it relates to the American Recovery Act funds. First was to set a series of forums with our internal departments, our not-for-profit partners, as well as our partners in municipal governments that operate here in Ozaukee County. We're going to start these forums beginning in May once the committees are appointed. So the plan will be to have the committees and the oversight staff meet with those committees, talk through some of the strategic issues, and then really use these opportunities to generate ideas for the expenditure of ARPA funds. The second action that they took was the recommendation relating to the 2022 project fund, and that was to fund all of those projects with ARPA monies. Done for a couple of reasons. One, we have a timeline to spend those monies, so this will allow us to expend about $2.7 million of ARPA money is the recommendation, and do that within the timeline. It will also allow us to keep our capital fund whole and available for other projects as we move forward. So a lot of discussion on that in 2 weeks, and that will come to this board for a vote at your April meeting. So there is a meeting in April. I know I've had a few questions. That first meeting in April is on the calendar, and the board will meet that day. The executive committee also received a draft copy of county board rules. This has been a long-standing to-do of my office, the clerk's office, and the corporation counsel's office, kind of update and refresh these board rules with a plan to have them approved so they're in place when the new board is seated in April. This will allow the new board to receive a new copy of the rules and kind of understand how procedures and rules are set forth. We did a really comprehensive review. We worked with the Counties Association. I think we have county board rules for almost every single county in the state of Wisconsin. So we kind of looked through those and look for areas where ours could maybe be built up and look for areas where things might be amended and changed and improved. So they went to the executive committee in draft form for discussion at their last meeting, and they'll be returning to them again in April for adoption by this board in April. So we'll get a draft copy out for everyone so that they can take a look at them as we move forward. So that concludes my report today, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to take questions if there are any.
We have any questions for Our administrator? Mhm.
I'm also happy to not take any questions.
Oh, looks like you're going to be happy. No questions. All right. Thank you, Jason. Next up, we have Resolution 21-62. This increase of revenues in 2022 land and water management. We have a motion from the floor. Motion made by Nelson. Second by Supervisor Holyoke. Any discussion? Any discussion? There is none. I will clear the board for the vote. Supervisor Minkle? Your vote didn't. Motion carries on a vote of 22-0. Next up, we have Resolution 21-63, carryover of the 2021 funds. We have a motion from the floor. Supervisor Richard, we have a second. Second by Supervisor Haas. Any discussion? Any discussion? There is none. I will clear the board for the vote. Motion carries on a vote of 22-0. Next up, we have Resolution 21-64, amending Chapter 3.01, Paren 17 of the Ozaukee County Policy and Procedure Manual, Sheriff's Office personnel changes. Motion made by Supervisor Nelson. We have a second. Supervisor Clark. Any discussion? Any discussion? There being none, I will clear the board for the vote. Motion carries on a vote of 22-0. Next up, we have Resolution 2165, compensation study, the public and private sector market comparables and recommendations. We have a motion from the floor. Supervisor Hendricks, second by Supervisor Braverman. Any discussion? Any discussion? There is none. I'll clear the board for the vote. Motion carries on a vote of 22-0. Next up, we have Resolution 2166, establishing the 2023-2026 salaries for the Office of the Sheriff and Clerk of Courts and Coroner. We have a motion from the floor. Supervisor Braverman, second by Supervisor Nelson. Any discussion? Any discussion? There is none. I'll clear the board for the vote. Motion carries on a vote of 22-0. Next up, we have resolution 2167, amending Ozaukee County Policy and Procedure Manual, section 2.05, Paren 2, term limits for county board chairperson, vice chairperson, and second vice chairperson. Motion from the floor, Supervisor Winker. Is there a second? Supervisor Wolf? Discussion. Any discussion? Supervisor Winker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. But first of all, I want to start off by my comments here today and saying that none of this is personal. I've known Chairman Schlimbo for 45 years. I've also been personal friends with the other two gentlemen that are sitting in these chairs, our first vice and second vice chair. None of this is personal. I've been doing some research for the last 2 years on this. What I'm proposing is I would like a structure of 3 two-year terms. We would basically mirror what we have for the committee chairs now, where they, after 6 years of being committee chair, they need to step down as chair. They could certainly be vice chair. They could certainly stay on the committee. They couldn't stay on the committee, but they could move to a different chair and chair that committee. So what I'm proposing is nothing we haven't looked at already. The one neat thing about what I'm looking at proposing here is starting in April of 22, after who is ever reelected to this board, everybody will start out with a clean slate. So we're not running anybody out of town. There's opportunity for people as they see fit. If everything stayed the same and we had the 3 current chairs in, the first it would change would be 20 of 28, 6 years down the road. So what I'm proposing is not real radical. One, I'm always up for new leadership and new ideas. I'm a new ideas kind of a guy. I've been in the private sector my whole life. I tell people in what I do, we often have to change daily in what we do in the private sector. So new ideas are refreshing, and there's nothing wrong with new leadership. And we would not be knocking what happened in the past. It's just what drives me. I'll give you a couple examples of how I looked at this. One, Sheboygan County is one, I will admit, is one of the few counties in the state that currently has term limits. And how they are structured, it's 2 two-year terms. So if the chair gets in, he has 4 years and then he steps down. I think when you look at what Washington County does, is very well run. I think they're pretty well up to speed on a lot of the current topics. I think they're well positioned to survive into the future. Not that we're not, but I do admire what they're doing there. I will look to our neighbors to the west, and I will give you, and this has been a change that's happened quite a little bit ago, but for 25 or 30 years, they had a long-serving county board chair. He was a wonderful gentleman. I think he brought a lot to the county board. But when he left, I think they kind of pulled the curtain back and go, we're maybe a little bit behind the times on some of the things they should have did. So that's my point of new leadership and new ideas. I will tell you this, there is not going to be any support coming from Corp Council, which I respect our Corp Council. I have, again, it's not personal at all. Her and I have had several sessions on the phone talking about several things on this thing. My point is, I think you could get 10 attorneys to stand in a room and debate one topic, and you'd get 10 different ideas or 10 different clarifications of an example of what they're looking at. Also, and I don't blame Corp Council, the way this board works, we are so reliant on support of Corp Council and so reliant of precedent. That's really how things are run here at the Ozaukee County Board. So I don't blame the Corp Council for non-support on this. I would just want to bring this up before the board for an honest and open discussion. My final point I will make, talk to many people down at WCA. I'm personal friends with the executive director down there, Mark O'Connell. They also are non-supportive of this. When you look at WCA, who is running WCA? Real simply, it's the long-serving chairman of county boards, administrators, and execs. So obviously, we're not going to get any support from here. If this dies, I'm certainly comfortable with it, but I did want to bring it up before the board for an open and honest discussion. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Supervisor Winker. Supervisor Becker?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My only comment would be that, I appreciate the work that went into this, but in my opinion, we vote on this every 2 years. In essence, we do have term limits already in place because we do have a choice every 2 years for these positions. So in my mind, since we already kind of have that in place, I'm not going to be voting for this today. So thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Becker. Any other discussion? Supervisor Minkle?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm wondering if Rhonda could explain her rationale for the memo. There were some things in there that I was kind of surprised about and kind of want to understand your reasoning about the rule about tying future boards' hands. It seems like if this is something that we are going to vote on, it may be better to vote on this after the new board is in place.
The issue with the policy is that it's not enforceable. Any board, newly elected board, has the right to choose their chairperson, and the only qualification to serve as chairperson is to be a member of the board. So say we had a policy on the books that said this resolution was passed, became part of our PNP. The board could still elect somebody, a chairperson, for a fourth term, and it would be a valid action. It would not be voidable because it's consistent with statute, because statute provides for that. And it comes down to a very old principle of you can't bind the hands of a future board, and especially with respect to a statutory right they have. So the statute controls. And the reason I object to the policy is not about the merits of it, of whether there should be chairpersons that serve 3-year terms or 2 terms or just 1 term. It comes down to knowledge of the board members' rights, which is to elect the chairperson they wish to have. That's a right they have. Each board has that right. So the policy on the books could be misleading to, particularly to new board members who might not realize that the statute provides something else. So it's my concern that we not have policies on the books that miseducate or mislead. Now, the memo does reference that I wrote, does reference other counties who do practice with term limits, such as I think it was Kenosha. They sort of have a longstanding practice of doing it where they elect a chairperson who then becomes the chairperson by unanimous, vote, and then is out of, office in terms of being a chairperson after that. Sheboygan County does have term limits. In reaching out and speaking to them, their corporation counsel, she acknowledged that the Attorney General opinion that sort of addresses this issue would be a problem for them if anyone raised it. So certainly a board could act consistent with such a policy and everything could be just fine until or unless somebody ever objected to it. But it's just my concern that we not put policies on the books that mislead. To Tom Winker's point, it is true, when you pose a question to lawyers, sometimes you get different responses to it. But I do think my advice on this issue is sound. It's grounded in statute. It's simply an unenforceable policy. The next board that comes along could just say, no, we're not doing that. And they would have every right to do so.
Thank you, Rhonda. Thank you, Supervisor Minkle. Supervisor Wolf?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. I'm in favor of this for 2 reasons. And one of them is that I just believe in term limits overall. I think one of the major issues we have in Washington, D.C. is career politicians, different from our founding fathers' view of what the especially House of Representatives was supposed to be. Now, none of us are career politicians here. You're not making a career out of the salary for this job and so forth. So I get that it's different, but I also feel like I want to be consistent. So So I'm going to vote for this because of my belief in term limits overall. I think government is just better with term limits. You know, we have it for our president for reasons, and we definitely should have it for our Congress and Senate. And I think really all the way down, we should just have it. I just think term limits is a good idea. I disagree with our respected corp counsel in the binding of future boards, because, you know, I look at this, we're binding the future boards to all kinds of things. We're gonna adopt rules in a month that's gonna bind the board to pages and pages and pages of rules. We've set their salaries already. And the other thing is that even though apparently statutorily you could override this, you know, we have a rule in place right now that governs the committee chair's term to 6 years, which is really the same kind of rule. And I had asked our corp counsel this previously, and she said, yes, it's true. She's against that rule as well, my understanding. And that rule violates, if you will, statute on the same grounds of eliminating somebody's ability to hold a particular office on the board. So I think we've already gone down this road. So to be consistent with my beliefs for term limits and to be consistent with our existing policy for 6-year limits on committee chairs, for both of those reasons, I'm going to be consistent and vote for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Wolf. Any other discussion? Supervisor Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Wow, a lot of great points being made. I'd like to thank my colleague Supervisor Winker for bringing this up. It's an uncomfortable topic, right? So, I mean, because it puts people on the spot to talk about things that sometimes don't get talked about. So it took some courage to do that wherever we lie on the vote. I respect our former colleague Don Doro. When he speaks, I listen, right? He has some good insights. And I respect that. And of course, Supervisor Wolf and I often agree, and I like the way he thinks about most things. But let's not go there. But shaped by my experiences in the military, I spent 28 years in the service in leadership positions, really throughout the time of my 3 decades of service. And the Coast Guard, the military, makes a habit of every 2 to 3 years bringing new leadership in, right? So it's new eyes. It's a desire to move a ball in a slightly different direction. It's the ability to develop a leadership excitement, a chain of getting to that leadership position that practice in the military allows. I think that's valuable. It encourages responsiveness to the team that is being led. That votes cannot be taken for granted. That what today you're in, tomorrow you might not be because of a tick on the calendar. So it requires a fair amount of responsiveness to your team. I appreciate what Corp Counsel is saying. I think this board could overturn just by simple vote that policy, if we were to adopt it, that we would adopt as a good practice, as thoughtful intent to develop a leadership opportunity for members in the board. They can do that, and that's fine. But that doesn't stop us from considering and adopting practices that we think are valuable to the leadership, the development, and the good conduct of this board. I will be voting for this. Again, it's not, to my colleague Supervisor Winker's point, it's not to a personal issue. It's just based on my experience with the military, having seen the value of that new set of eyes coming in and what that does, not just for the new leader, but what it does for the organizations behind it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Supervisor Ross. Supervisor Minkle, second time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A question for Rhonda again. So what is the potential pathways or what are the potential consequences, remedies, if, let's say we do adopt this, it passes, it's in our policies and procedures, it's, you know, not overturned for 6 years, and someone, the chairperson, because of the rules, is forced to not run again because of this rule. I mean, what, are they potentially reinstated? Are they, you know, what are
Well,
your thoughts on that?
The board could just acquiesce with the policy and impose the term limits. If somebody wanted to be a chairperson for a 4th term, they could probably nominate themselves and be on the ballot. A future board could vote to amend the P&P and eliminate the policy. There's any scenario really could happen with this. There's so many possibilities with it. But I don't think it prevents anyone from running because the statute simply indicates all you have to do to be chairperson is, you know, to run for chair is be a member. So it could be subverted. It could end up being subject to, you know, political manipulation in the future. Oh, now we want this chairperson for 6 years, but we don't want, you know, for 8 years, but we don't want that one for 8 years, that sort of thing. It could be, you know, manipulated a little bit. But again, every board that comes on will have full opportunity to elect who they wish as chairperson.
Anything else, Supervisor Winkle? Good. Thank you, Supervisor Winkle and Rhonda. Supervisor Richard?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I've changed my vote 3 or 4 times so far in this meeting. I thought I knew where I was before I came. A little bit of history, probably 15 years or more ago, we had a countywide referendum on term limits, and it overwhelmingly passed. And whatever, 22 years, I'm still here. So obviously we didn't follow what the vote was on that advisory referendum. Term limits, I don't know which way to approach it here, but first of all, we've had quite a few elections with the chairman every 2 years. And as I recall, most of the time, there's been nobody else willing to run for county chair. There may be just some discussion like, well, if we had the term limits and the chair couldn't run again, then other people would be willing to run. I tried that in my district in December when I decided, I took out papers early that I would not run, knowing that other people would run for my district. Well, what happened? Nobody signed any papers to run, so we have no candidates. So I kind of look at it, first of all, I thank everybody that's serving as a supervisor to do that, to run and serve. I thank the chairman for willing to run to serve as chairman. The only problem comes in probably some places where the chairman over time will figure that it's the board who serves the chairman versus the chairman serving the board. That can happen. So I don't know which way is the best way to go at this point, but we need a willingness of other people to step up and say, you know, I'm going to run. I have nothing against the chairman, but let's see how it comes out. And I always say, maybe, you know, when you get to that election point, everybody the candidates get 5 minutes each to say, why should I be the chairman for the next 2 years? We haven't had that opportunity because nobody else seems to be willing to do the job. Hopefully in April, when we might have, 11 to 12, 13 new members on the board, that'll change. But it's really a hard way to go right now. It's nice to say you can have term limits, and I've pushed for that for the committee level. Remember, I pushed for that, for reducing this board size again and having this sort of training where vice chairs become chairs and so on. But that failed. So we're kind of where we're at. So in the next minute, I'll decide how I'm going to vote. Thank you for your time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor Richard. Supervisor Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be voting no to this, and the big reason is going back to what Supervisor Becker said, and it's that we do have term limits in place, pretty much, that we get to vote on this every 2 years. So, and anybody can, in this room that's on this board, the second meeting in April, can throw their name in the hat to be in those positions. And if my memory serves me correctly, the last time we had our election, the current board chair ran unopposed. So, you know, in a situation like that, if we had these term limits in place and it was the chairman's last term and he wasn't able to run again, but nobody else stepped up, what do we do? And what if that's the person that we really want to be the chair? Are we then forced to have someone else do it that doesn't want the job? Because last time no one else wanted it. So, you know, we have term limits in place. Every 2 years we get to vote on this, and anyone in this room can run for it. So I think we're all set in that department, and I'll be voting no. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Larson. Supervisor Godden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So while I too favor term limits in general, this isn't necessarily term limits on our positions or how many times we can run. This is term limits on leadership. So we might put ourselves in a position, from what I'm hearing, that if there isn't somebody that is willing or maybe the best candidate for leading this group, we might be putting ourselves in a position that we don't want to be. But then I'm also hearing that this also could be unenforceable. So I don't support passing things or having rules that are unenforceable. So I too am a bit torn. And because I'm kind of a data-driven person, I'm wondering if there's data that could tell us in these positions, what is the average? You know, how many years does someone in this position typically, you know, how many years do you typically hold this position based on the last 20 or 30 years? Do we have a problem? Did this come up because we're seeing that, you know, someone's been in this position for 18 years or 7 years or 8 years? Is there any data that could help us be more informed with the decision?
I can't answer that question. I don't know.
Well, he
Is
said,
data?
give one example, right? So already, so does it sound like already from what the math he's doing in his head, that there already is something organically in place that's happening, that the terms are averaging from 4 to 7 years? So again, I just get concerned that there's so many important rules that we need to follow and enforce. And I just don't want to have one more rule that we can't enforce. So that's where I'm struggling with, you know, which route to go here as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Godden. Supervisor Whitworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. Obviously, I'm new to this board, and I can certainly understand the arguments on both sides. Obviously, new blood would be favored over a long period of time in order to bring new and fresh ideas. But I do believe, as I'm hearing here, that there is a process for that. You have an election every 2 years. in order to elect a new chairperson. I understand how legacy does have an effect, the power of the incumbency. But as our esteemed speaker earlier today said, you know, if you want to make a change, then it's your responsibility to step up and be the agent of that change. Additionally, we also, you know, there's a process to change the statute itself. Not necessarily in our hands, but there is a process for doing that as well, you know, and I've been an attorney for 26 years. And so, you know, I had an opportunity to review Corporation Counsel's analysis, and I tend to agree with that analysis and that position. You know, and I suppose the term is that I'm wary as an attorney to be creating rules that are not enforceable and therefore inconsistent, in my opinion, with the law. I think that that does have the potential to cause a great deal of confusion, both with not only the rules themselves, but also the reputation of this board for how we are going to proceed and proceed legally on any given matter that would be before this board. I think it opens up a Pandora's box that we need to be concerned about. And so those are my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Whitworth. Supervisor Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I'd like to thank Don Dorwith for coming in. He previously held this spot for 20 years. And I know we agree on a lot of things, but on this one, I'm going to have to disagree with him on. I think it's important that we do have term limits because, like I said, this is a government that was formed by the people, for the people. And quite simply, it was made to have participation. And when we're talking about putting in rules that can't be enforced or can't be enforced, well, that's up to us to determine what we can and what we can't. And that changes, I think, over time when you get new people that are involved. This government, whether it's from Washington DC down a local level, is based on participation. And in order to do that, if you've got someone that's in a position for a long period of time, it kind of discourages other people from wanting to participate. I mean, quite simply, this country's been around for 246 years. And quite frankly, you can go back to George Washington, could have been president for as long as he wanted to. And he made the decision to step down because he didn't want to lead a country that was based on a country that we broke away from to create this union, create the United States. And we've only had one president that served 3 terms, which was Franklin Delano Roosevelt. So I think it is important that we do support term limits, and I'm in support of it. And there's nothing wrong with the leadership that we currently have in Ozaukee County, nor has there been in the past. But I think it is important to exemplify that we are for change and that we are for bringing in new people to participate in this government, no matter whether it's in the military, like Supervisor Ross has served in the military, or using your talents and abilities to serve on county board or even local boards or a higher board from there. So I will be voting in favor for this, and I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Haas. Supervisor Winker, second time.
I'll be very brief. Simply 2 points. One, when I talked to my friend down at the Counties Association, the executive director, Mark O'Connell, there is no such statute that is on the book. So I want to be very clear. This is not a statute on the books. It's an attorney's interpretation. And 2, responding to Supervisor Michelle's point, when I did my research, it is all over the board. There's some long-serving county board chairmen out there. There's some counties that whistle through leadership just on their own pretty frequently. But Michelle, it's all over the board. So that's kind of what I got to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Supervisor Winker. Supervisor Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm finding this discussion very interesting. I kind of agree, I guess, with Supervisor Richard. You can change your mind a few times here. But what I find interesting is a couple months ago, we had the back of our room was packed with people wanting us to quit gerrymandering. Our corp counsel said that, you know, we can't even make that decision. It's out of our hands. It's a state function, not county board. And everybody said, make sure you listen to the corp counsel. We have done that consistently. Now today, we think it's not important to listen to our corp counsel. I just don't understand the reasoning of some people. And as far as term limits. I also agree with Supervisor Wolf. If this were across the board, I would certainly support it. But our US representatives are not bound by any term limits except for the president. Our state, none of our state legislatures are bound by term. And I think Mr. Winker will agree that he's not bound. I don't know how many multiple terms he served up in Belgium as county or as chairman of the community up there. But it looks like we're just trying to cherry pick. And I've heard the term probably 42 times, this isn't personal. Somehow I'm getting to the belief that it is personal. Now, everybody can say it's not, but if it's not, why do you keep bringing it up? We've had, as I recall, terms of county board chairmen anywhere from 1 term to 3. Now, maybe there's another one in there that I don't recall, but my recollection is, to answer Michelle's comment, is we're not talking about all the boards in the state here. She wanted to know what is the average here. I'm guessing it's around 4.5, 4.5, 5. But I could be wrong, but that's just my guess, knowing we've gone from 1 term to 3. So I'm certainly not going to support this. I'm not going to all of a sudden try to cherry pick when I should believe our corp counsel and when I shouldn't. I don't always agree with the reasoning that the law has for certain things, but I respect the interpretation of our corp counsel. So again, I'm voting against this. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Nelson. Supervisor Wolf, second time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to respond to Supervisor Nelson on 2 points. I highly respect our corp counsel and we've worked together on a number of things. And, she is our advisor. And we have to take her opinions and her expertise to heart and then make a decision. And I don't think any of us, and I don't think she would expect us either to just do exactly what she says. That she's advising us and she has given us some tremendous advice. The point I deviate on here is that we have already done this. We've already done this. For our committee chairs, they're limited to 6-year terms. So this is doing it again toward other offices, but this isn't like going off the reservation and ignoring our corp counsel. This is really following precedent more so. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Wolf. Supervisor Melitek.
Yes, I just wanted to add to that. I'm torn about this and I appreciate the conversation, the debate. I think it's very good. I too, at exec, I too shared Supervisor Dorwart or ex-Supervisor Dorwart's thoughts on one of our former chairman Brooks, and this time he served, and he would have been limited, and that bothered me. And we talked about the ability to serve, or the people that are come forward to serve. So that's one of my biggest concerns, is to get the best person for the job, no matter what. And also, I'm one of the people on here, vice chairman, that's mostly talked about chairman, but I won't take anything personal on what anybody votes. So we've talked about this, Supervisor Winker and I, and had some good discussions about it. And I'd just like to add, as far as history, I was thinking about, I've been here 10 years, and I don't think we've had when I got elected to this, it was I think I defeated a former first chair, and there was a lively debate. I stepped up to run. So
3 people.
Pardon?
You had 3 people run.
3 people, yeah. So we stepped up to run against the person that was in this position. So that's it. Oh, okay. Anyway, so the system seemed to work, at least as far as I'm concerned, that, I was like Supervisor Larson said, I thought I wanted to step up and see if I could be the person to do this. And I wanted the spot, and as we all can for this spot or any other election. So what Supervisor Larson said in the end, we do this every 2 years. So, and I think the process works fairly well in our board. So thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Melitek. Supervisor Becker, second time.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know we talked about the fact that we limit to 6 years how long someone can chair a committee. That's not elected, that's appointed. So it's a little different scenario. Again, I think we're trying to solve a problem here that doesn't exist when we look at the number of years that on average that someone serves in these 3 positions. Again, every 2 years, we get a choice. And if we pass this, it's something that is going to be unenforceable. I appreciate, again, like I said, the thought that went into this. It's a lively discussion. It's a good discussion, but I'm just, not in favor of this. And I would suggest to everyone, please, to vote against it. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Becker. Is there any other discussion? Supervisor Ross, second time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to echo what Supervisor Wolf, because I agree with them a lot. That when you ask an attorney a question, your corp counsel, you get advice on what the law that may provide guidance and maybe what the legal risks are. But our job as county supervisors is to consider that and then look at the larger picture, not just the legal picture, but what's the best thing for the organization. And on that, represent our constituents to the best of our ability on making a decision about what's the best decision for this body. And I don't know what that is here, right? I don't think there's much risk, frankly, if we pass this, because we can overturn it, 3 months from now with Supervisor Schlenvolt putting his name in the hat for chairman. And if he wins, then he wins. And we have de facto overturned it, if I understand correctly. And that would be perfectly legal. It would violate our policies. It would be a point of decisioning for this body or that body to realize that a previous board had thought there was some good practice in establishing these term limits and make a conscious decision on that leadership to reinstate or to bring back whoever that chairman would be in future years. So I think there's very little legal risk in this. There's very little binding of some future board. I think it does do, as I said before, some good things for us. One thing I just wanted to bring up, and I'm not sure quite how I feel about this, and I'm probably going to say it in the wrong way, but maybe there's some reaction here to seeing a number of our supervisors in this room have been appointed by that chairperson, by Chairman Schlenvolt, and it would be absolutely natural to have some loyalty to the person who appoints you. And I think, like I said, I feel like I'm saying this entirely wrong and I'm going to communicate the wrong message, but there's a dynamic there. And so I don't know where this thing is going to go, but I think there's an opportunity to communicate to not just ourselves, but to our constituents that we value and want to incentivize leadership practices that encourage people from the board to come forward into those leadership opportunities, and we're creating that opportunity for them. So again, I don't know where this is going to go, and I'll respect it either way. And certainly I appreciate all the comments which have given me, as well as a number of other supervisors, pause about how we came in here maybe with our original thoughts. So thank you for that, Mr. Chairman, and that I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Ross. Supervisor Gravel?
Yeah, I just want to deflate the idea in the room that nobody would run for chairman if we had term limits. The reason nobody runs for chairman, because you end up being the bad person in the room, and nobody in this room wants to be that bad person, which is what you were trying to get to, and I'm trying to put out. But if the chair, if there's nobody up there, and the office is clean because your term limits are up, then somebody will definitely run. I fully believe that. That's my statement.
Thank you Supervisor Grabow. Supervisor Millitek.
Yes, I just like to clarify, I want to make sure we have to have this straight, is that this, if we pass this, this would not apply to the next 6 years. We, the existing people on this, it sort of be grandfathered in. I just want to make sure that's clear, that so that wouldn't change in April. Yeah. Okay, I just want to make sure that we all were aware of that was the case. Thank you.
And if I may, as to that point, I've been having a communication with the clerk that the minutes should reflect that interpretation of this rule if it passes. Because when you look at the rule, it could be interpreted one of two ways, that somebody who's now served 6 years can't be elected again. So somebody like Lee would, I think he's done 6 years, would be out under that interpretation. That's not the interpretation that was advanced by the sponsor of this legislation. And it's the general understanding that's not how we're interpreting it, but the minutes won't reflect that for future reference in case there becomes a dispute on how it's to be interpreted. So if this passes, I'm recommending somebody make a motion that the minutes would include the interpretation. And I've drafted an interpretation that I could provide for that if it passes.
Supervisor Wolf is requesting to speak a third time. We need board, according to the rules of the board floor, we need to give him permission. Need a voice vote on, are we good for?
Not subject to
Go ahead,
debate.
Supervisor Wolf.
I just wanted to ask Corporation Counsel a question. So the way the resolution is written,
Hold on, Marty, we need a voice vote on that. All in favor of suspending the rules? All opposed, motion carried. Continue. Oop. Looks like we're gonna vote.
We need a
because
2/3 vote on that.
We're gonna have to set the board for voting on that because we had some no's. Motion's on the floor, too late. Motion made by Supervisor Ross, seconded by Millitek, and Supervisor Larson had to leave. Supervisor Larson had to leave, you know that? Okay, the motion ahead in front of you is to suspend the rules, allow Supervisor Wolf to speak a third time. There's no debate, so we're gonna vote right now. Motion carries on a vote of 14-6 with. That'll be passed by 2/3. Corp,
Of members present. Says right here it is.
Thank you. Sorry.
motion passes. Marty,
Thank you.
continue.
Rhonda, the further resolve that this policy shall take effect on April 19th, beginning with the 2022, 2024 term. To me, that was really clear that that's when it starts. The 3 consecutive years limit starts next term. You're thinking that's not clear and we need further?
Is now beyond the polling limit for the term. There's effective date of this policy and then there's polling.
Sure. Okay, so yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so under those, if it passes, then we should amend or something clarifying the minutes that the tolling would start with the next term as well, including it. Yeah. Okay, all right, thank you. Thank you all, sorry.
Is there any other discussion? There is no other discussion. This is on resolution 2167, amending Ozaukee County Policy Procedure Manual, section 205, Paren 2, term limits for chair, vice chair, and second vice chair. I will clear the board for the vote. Motion fails, yes, at a count of 6 yes and 14 no. And 1 abstention, I'm sorry. Next up, we have no reappointments. Any supervisors have any announcements? Any committee chairs have any announcements? If not, I would accept the motion to adjourn. Supervisor Nelson, second by Clark. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, motion carried. Thank you to Shannon for bringing in the students from Milwaukee Lutheran. We appreciate it. I hope they learned some things from our debate.
Hold on.